Okay, hi Guy. Thanks for joining in. Now we're conducting this webinar on My Meeting Place, and this is primarily for our hosts who've joined and signed up for My Meeting Place. And I think I want to give more information to the hosts about what we're really doing with My Meeting Place online. But before that, can we just start off with um, uh, uh, telling them a bit more about what's the purpose of My Meeting Place? So can you talk a bit about that first?
So what we're trying to do with My Meeting Place is to help people keep psychologically and emotionally connected when we've got to remain physically disconnected. The research is really very clear that we all need to be connected in healthy social and other kinds of relationships. So this was one way that you and I have come up with to try and mitigate some of those concerns, potential mental health issues and that sort of thing that come up as a result of people being isolated. So that's what we're looking to do is to create some groups that will go for a number of weeks where the hosts hold those groups together and people develop meaningful relationships within the groups. Okay, now the hosts don't have to be educated in group work, although we will be giving them some skills in that regard to help them through it. What's important for hosts to remember is that these are not counselling and psychotherapy groups. They're literally an online meeting place, and the hosts are there to just hold that space and give people the room to, I guess, articulate what's happening for them, but also to form some kind of decent connection between people. So that's why the groups will be what are called closed groups. That is, they'll be formed with a certain number of participants and then they'll continue with those same participants week in, week out. There may be some changes to that over time, and with my help and your help, we will kind of manage that if people drop out or want to come in or whatever it is. But essentially, the group will be the same group so that those relationships can develop over time. What we're trying to do with that, one of the reasons is we could easily have, let's say, a sort of an open door group where people could just roll up at the time and participate in the group and then leave again. However, that wouldn't give people the stability that My Meeting Place is looking to try and replicate in such an unstable time with COVID-19. So that's why the groups are closed. Plus, it gives people the chance to actually really get some, the more the relationships are developed within the group, the more the groups will self-run and the more meaningful it will become, the more serious people can be kind of helped and supported as they struggle through this uncertain territory.
Yeah, I think it's really important to, also clarify again that these are not counseling and therapy groups, and therefore the hosts are not expected to behave in that way, but they're expected to behave in more of holding the group together, listening to the stories that people are going to be sharing within that group as well. So I think there's a commitment to do that within the group, and there's a commitment from the host to do that. And while I'm talking about commitments, maybe it's important to also highlight and outline what are the expectations or ground rules for the hosts that we want to set up for them, perhaps.
Yeah, so I've spoken generally, so now I'll give a bit more detail. What the hosts do need to do is, and people who know me will have heard me say this many times, is whilst it's not a counselling and therapy group, the hosts are intended to be somewhat therapeutic. And that means that hosts will model healthy relating. They'll provide space for participants to get heard. If someone's speaking over someone, for example, it will be up to the host to sort of intervene just gently and just say, hang on a second, just want to finish hearing what Jeff was saying, Steve, and if you could just, so you kind of just constantly putting those sort of gentle rules, I guess, in place. In group work, that's called a rule or a norm, depending on how it's done, and those norms are important parts of healthy functioning in groups. So the host will need to demonstrate good communication skills and effective listening skills. So all the people who are going to be participating as hosts already have those skills, and they know how to use them quite specifically. And of course, you know, the groups will give them a chance to hone those skills. But yes, that's what they need to bring, is healthy relating skills, really good listening skills, and the capacity to help elicit, by demonstrating those skills, to help elicit other people's stories within the group, because that's what they're there to do, is help people unfold.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that they're helping people to unfold, and so they're not doing therapy but being therapeutic. There is a difference in that, and really I think we're also telling our hosts to be themselves,
Sure.
and I guess something that a lot of beginning practitioners, as we've experienced, try to do is do something, but it's more about just bringing it together, be yourselves, and listen well to the stories. And like you said, I think it's such difficult times. This is going to be a shared experience for people as well. So I'm wondering, how much do we also expect our hosts to share within the group? Is there an expectation around that?
Yeah, that's an important question. So what we're talking about is context now. So when I sort of say it's not a counselling group or a psychotherapy group, the context is COVID-19 and keeping people connected via an online community. That's it. That's the mandate of the group. So you aren't there as a host to work on someone's psychological problems, or if they have a crisis. That's not up to you to be their kind of clinical support in that way. However, it is up to the hosts to kind of manage a situation like that if it unfolds. So if someone reveals that they're really quite sort of having a desperate time of things, it will be up to the hosts to make contact sort of respectfully and privately to suggest that they get some help. Now, the host can approach you and me to get some support with that, because they'll need to do that just so that in the management of the group. But in terms of the actual participant, we will provide a list of various services that are available to help people. Now, that doesn't, let's say someone's going through a crisis, they don't have to leave the group, but they do need to be advised to get appropriate qualified help depending on what that need is. And that isn't the host. That is not the context of what My Meeting Place is. And obviously we're being really, really clear about that, primarily because I want to support the hosts to go there for that purpose and develop some skills themselves and really give something. You know, most of the people who volunteered have all said, we want to help. And that's just wonderful. And so that's what they're there to do. So in terms of their disclosure, this is something that we kind of need to, this is a bit of a rolling thing for us. I would suggest that the hosts disclose a little bit, but that their role is that you're managing the group. That's your sort of primary role, and your secondary role is as a participant. Hosts are welcome to and are invited to join a group for themselves, where they can actually have a place to be supported too, but the host function is slightly different. So you may decide to disclose as a host in order to get things moving, but not in great detail or depth about yourself. You know, it would be more of a connecting disclosure, like, yeah, look, I've experienced that too. I wonder who else in the group has been experienced what Fred just talked about. It's kind of like that. So it's a bit of a connecting thing, but the host is there to practically provide the group via Zoom or whatever platform is being utilised, and then to manage it and keep everyone safe as possible, and then to begin and end appropriately by doing some summaries at the end of that sort of thing. And so you can disclose a little bit in that process if you feel like that. But we want to keep hosts safe, and that may well mean that they have a little bit of professional distance from the other participants.
Okay, guys, so what I heard you say back then was that some professional distance is important and a little disclosure is okay for them to do. But then that brings me to the question, because it's such a difficult time, and what if a participant gets really emotional and probably they start, crying perhaps. How is the host expected to handle that situation?
Well, that's part of obviously using good listening skills is you just listen to them, you encourage them, because the whole point about having a meaningful community to come to is that you can express your emotions, that you can talk about your fears, you can talk about your sadness, you can demonstrate your uncertainty in the future and how that's impacting you. I mean, that's the whole point. So hosts need to be very comfortable to handle that simply by listening. That's what you do. You don't fix that person, right? That's not the task here. It's not the task in counselling and psychotherapy anyway, but certainly here it's important not to rush in and try and sort of make things better. What you would do as a host is reflect the content of what the person's saying carefully and thoughtfully, gently. And then you would reflect the emotion that you're seeing so it gets validated. That's what a community does for one another. They hear you, they see you, right? And that's what ensures that the mental health issues don't emerge. Just because someone cries or is upset or even angry, their host needs to be able to hear those things, reflect them back to that particular participant, and then once that's done, inquire amongst the other members of the group about what happens for them when they hear someone so upset by the fact that they're on their own or that they've lost their job, right? So again, the other participants there are to hear and to be sort of sympathetic and empathetic, hopefully, to the person who's expressing some kind of emotion like that, so that they're released in a healthy way and that no one feels like they've got to take responsibility for that person, but just offer a presence, right? A good, connected presence. That's what the hosts are providing and demonstrating and modelling. And over time, the other participants will get that and they'll start to do it too. And that's what you're after as a host is modelling in such a way that the participants also begin to sort of mimic that. It's an essential sort of effect of how, mimicry is actually a good thing. It's how we all learn to do things.
Yeah. So I think one of the reasons I did ask that question is because it can for beginning, I guess, people who are very new to this process of being in a group and facilitating a group in that way, it can be a bit perhaps challenging and difficult. So I guess just going back to your earlier point about being aware of your perhaps maintaining boundaries, still doing, not over disclosing, but really using your basic skills is what you're talking about. And something that I think I've learned from you, which you often talk about, is reflect and empathize continuously. Yes. And that's what you're saying right now.
Well, one of the things you and I were talking about yesterday as we were preparing for this was, what are you doing? It's kind of simple. It's basically reflect, empathize, repeat. Reflect, empathize, repeat. You put it on wash cycle, and the sort of the washing machine is kind of not a bad metaphor, because what we're trying to do is help people clean out some of those emotions that they may be stuck with and that are starting to colour all their appearance, right? And so fresher and cleaner and better, and they go on. And so that brings me to another really important skill that is part of counselling and psychotherapy, and certainly it's part of group work, is to normalise. And one of the ways that we normalise people's experiences and feelings is to go through that process, right? So you reflect what you're hearing.
Yeah.
You got to be precise about that too, right? You don't want to add to it, you don't want to detract to it, you don't want to minimise it. You want to reflect what they are saying, and not what you think that they're saying, but what they're saying, and then you empathise. And it's really important that hosts understand this. I have, again, people who know me will have heard me say this before, but the idea of empathy is simply put this way, in practice anyway, which is to say, I imagine, given what you've just told me, I imagine you must feel, and you give them 2 or 3 feeling words, and you sort of see where that lands with the person, and you're doing your best to really understand what it's like for their position. One of the things that hosts don't want us to do is say, oh, look, I understand what it's like for you. It's exactly that way for me, because all of a sudden you've taken the focus away from that person. They then close down, and then it becomes about you, right? So this is why the host only discloses, you know, a little bit to act like oil for the group. But basically you're there to support them to do that, for them to come out.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point that you're talking about in terms of normalizing. And earlier you also said it's like a cleansing process for the group or the participants, and it's making me think about perhaps then the cleansing process for the host as well, in terms of we have an hour or so session, and then what is the host left with? And how does the host manage that? I think that's important as well to kind of think about.
Right. So one of the ways that we discussed doing that was to, I think it's important that hosts take a note of any concerns that they have. Now, hopefully that won't happen. Okay, but if you have a specific concern, you kind of want to say a bit about what that is, and then you can make, as a host, contact with you or me, and we can sort of support you with what's any kind of action you need to take. But really, at the end of each group, the idea is that hosts make some notes about their own experience. How was that for you? I'm left drained, or I'm really energized, or that was exciting, or I'm left troubled by something that somebody said that I didn't follow up or find out enough about, right? Or something like that. Just some general comments that helps you keep clear with your own emotions, because of course, you know, the hosts are, like all of us, like you and me, going through this too, and we're trying to figure out ways. So one way to do that is to just make some notes after each session about the impact on you, to help you keep kind of clean of it, and so you don't take on board other people's problems. That is not the idea of the group. If you find yourself as a host feeling weighed down, pressured, confused, upset, we're here for you, to support you, right? So that's what our kind of task is in this, is to help the hosts in this volunteer position, and so that they're not left with more than they're sort of putting in, you know. So
yeah, so I think again it's really important to reiterate what you're saying, that if they do come up with challenges, or they are left over with something, you and I are there to support them, and they need to bring it back to the two of us. And I guess I'd like to leave it there in terms of really the rules and guidelines, but I'd also like to put it out to the people watching, the hosts watching this webinar, in terms of questions that they might have, which we may address in our next session, probably. So yeah.
Yeah, look, I guess that's one thing that I want to be able to do is I think one thing that we can help people as they grow through this process as hosts. I mean, that's what's going to happen, right? Like, the hosts are going to be growing as they're doing this. This is a reasonably challenging exercise. I'm hoping it's going to be really rewarding for hosts as much as it is for participants to have my meeting place for themselves. But of course, things are going to come up, questions are going to come up, confidence may be tested, but also new skills may be found, and we want to celebrate that too with people. So to hear any questions that where we can do a video and support the hosts, and also, of course, we're going to have the supervisory process too, which will mean the hosts will have a certain amount of supervision at the end of each month, where groups will come together in group supervision with me, and they'll be able to kind of just talk about their experience, how it's going, get a little bit of input from other group hosts, and from myself, and from you, and sort of have that kind of support too.
Great. I think I'd like to stop there, Guy. Thank you very much for your time, and I'd like the hosts to come forward and bring more questions for the next webinar. Thank you so much.